Welcome to the Bill Cartwright Show with our special guest, USF alum, Coach Jim Brovelli. Jim, welcome to the show.
Well, thanks, Bill. Thanks for having me. Looking forward to it.
You know, we want to get to know you really quickly. So why don't we start with this? Tell us about where you grew up and tell us a little bit about your mom and dad.
Well, I'll tell you what, I was born and raised in San Francisco, the city of San Francisco. My dad was a butcher for Del Monte Meat Company in the city. In fact, that was my summer job, to work with my dad. And I kind of went in the salami bologna department while he was cutting orders for, for restaurants in the city. So, and my mom was a home, stayed at home and then raised the kids. I had a sister who went to Mercy High School, and we both went to St. Cecilia's Grammar School, right there on 15th Avenue in the Sunset District. So you little skinny Italian kid growing up in that sunset, freezing cold fog, where I used to go play basketball in the 19th Avenue Park and Herbert Hoover Junior High School. So we really had a lot of fun growing up there. And then from St. Cecilia's, I went to SI. My sister went to Mercy High School.
You know, tell us about yourself in high school. What kind of kid were you? Were you a sports kid? Were you an academic kid?
I wouldn't classify me as an academic kid. I would say that I was more of a sports kid. In fact, I'll give you a story. When I was in grammar school, of course, the Bay Area basketball, Bill, you'll know this. It was pretty darn good in the late 40s and mid 50s. Of course, with Pete Newell, Coach Pete Newell coaching the 1949 NIT championship for USF, that was really a great win for the school and the city. And then, of course, the Bill Russell 60 in a row games. Well, when I was at SI, my mother, she always made me get in my room and study every night at 7 o'clock. So get in your room at 7. Well, in those years, they broadcast on the radio USF basketball games. So I used to go, I got to go study, Mom. I'm going to get in there at 7 o'clock. And it just so happened that the game started at the same time. And so I was able to sneak in there and listen to the USF basketball broadcast, which was really, to me, I was just in grammar school, and I started off playing CYO basketball, and fortunately was lucky to have a lot of good fundamental coaches in those years in CYO. One by the name of Daryl Smith, who's no longer with us, and those guys were young and they were great teachers. And in fact, my high school coach, when we won the championship in the city championship, was Stan Buchanan, who played on the USF basketball team in that 60 in a row years. So we really got a lot of knowledge from Stan Buchanan coaching us, and we went undefeated in the city in 1960 and went on to the Tournament of Champions, where the final game was against McClymonds. And you'll also remember this with Paul Silas playing at McClymonds, and they beat us about 10 points. And that's when the big Northern California high school championships were really huge, in the Tournament of Champions there over at Cal Berkeley.
Awesome. So you ended up at USF. Now, how did that happen? And what were some of your other possibilities?
Well, in those years, much of it was local recruiting. You never really had national recruiting. When I was coming out of high school, you had some, but not a lot. In fact, we had a guy by the name of Fred LaCour, who was probably one of the best city basketball players that have come out of San Francisco. And of course, Tom Sherry in those years, they were ahead of me, but those were two of the great ones that came out of the city in those years. But Freddie LaCour ended up at USF. Of course, Tom Sherry goes to St. Mary's, two guys that could have played anywhere in the country. And but in those years, it was basically the Bay Area schools. We had the St. Mary's and Santa Clara and Stanford and Cal, and Oregon and Northwest schools would come down and recruit also. But for me personally, listening to the radio in grammar school and listening to the great games and teams that USF had by coaching icons. Phil Woolpert at USF coaching such a great team, and then of course Pete Newell with the NIT championship. So it was a natural to me. Where are you going to school? Well, I'm going to go to USF. I went to SI and it was a Jesuit high school, and of course USF's a Jesuit school, so the transition was really kind of easy for me from an academic standpoint, and also basketball, because you knew most of the players when you got there. In fact, I remember on the radio in the grammar school things, I always used to listen to the two guards, Casey Jones and then Hal Perry, and of course Bill Russell in the center. They used to, were allowed to really kind of extend and take chances because you had Bill back there. And but the guy that I never forgot was Gene Brown, who came off the bench, and I always waited for him to get off the bench and come in because he'd always score like 20, 22. Quite a player for a third guard coming off the bench at USF.
So now you're on campus. Talk about your first impressions when you were on campus. Talk about your coach and your teammates.
Yeah, when I first went to USF, I would say I was kind of immature. I was, a typical cocky. I made All City. I made Player of the Year in San Francisco, and so here I am. I'm coming into USF, and I'm going to play basketball. And so my in my mind, I am going to play basketball. Well, that was a mistake. I didn't do too well my freshman year academically at USF, so I had to really buckle down. In fact, I can remember Ross Judici, who was my freshman coach, brought me in, and he said, you better wake up here because you won't be around. And that just woke me up. I said, what? What, are you kidding me? So I woke up, and the second semester turned everything around for the rest of the 4 years. But yeah, the first semester was really an adjustment for me, even though it seemed easy from from SI to USF. I really had to learn a lot of more discipline, except, I was just coming in, shooting the ball and having fun. So, it probably was a great wake-up call for me, because I think it really helped me. And then Ross Judici was as good a coach as you would want on the lower level, teaching fundamentals. We had freshman teams in those years, where before you never, now we don't have freshman teams, but in those years, a good fundamental coach like Ross Judici was just the best you could ever have.
Talk about some of your teammates.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, my teammates, we had a guy by the name of Jake Crawford coming from San Diego, 6'6", forward, ended up being a dentist. He was no longer with us. Jake was quite a player from San Diego and a great recruit. And, the coach that we had, Coach Pete Paletta, really had some great goals coming in. USF, of course, had those great years with Bill Russell and Phil Woolpert. Then they had a couple off years. And then they hired Pete Paletta, who came from Monterey Junior College, and brought in some first JC kids the first couple of years, and then really went out and got some really talented high school kids. I was fortunate to play with Joe Ellis, who at McClymonds, Eddie Thomas at McClymonds, who still holds the single game scoring record, by the way, at McClymonds. Eddie was quite a player until he blew his knee out. So then Huey Thomas, of course, played on the team, and Huey, he'll tell you what a great Dodger he was. He was a baseball player before he came in, and so we had a good group of guys. Erwin Muller from Livermore, 6'9", played in the NBA for about, let's say, 7-8 years. Of course, the biggest recruit that Coach Paletta brought in was Ollie Johnson, and that's a funny story, because Lloyd Moffitt, who came out of the service, who was a year before, or maybe 2 years before Ollie really was going to go to San Jose State. And Lloyd got a hold of him. They were friends back in Washington, D.C. And Lloyd said, Ollie, why don't you go to USF? I'm here and it's a good school. And so Ollie changed his mind, came to USF, and the rest is history for a great All-American player who put USF really back on that national level, with Eddie. and Joe Ellis and Erwin Muller and Dave Lee, who was from Modesto, a 6'9", great shooting forward, faced the basket player. And I was at guard with Joe Ellis, and so we had quite a group of guys. Not only the talent that they had, but to this day, I mean, we're the closest friends and teammates that could ever be, and it lasted a lifetime. So the experience that I had with teammates and the school there and the basketball, it is just not to be replaced.
You talk a little bit about, now, did you live on campus? And if you did, what was that like? Because school has changed so much now. So what was it like then?
Well, then it was funny because, I lived right in the city with my mom and dad. And they said you can live on campus if you want. And I said, yeah, I'd like to. You could get away from home about a half a mile, So we did that. And I had a good roommate from Utah, who was a high school player, Paul Willard. And so we had opportunity to meet new players from different areas. And I'll never forget that Paul said, gee, I have one main street in Orem, Utah, and I come here in the city and all these big streets. So he was kind of shell shocked. But, we had a lot of guys around the Bay Area that what I always thought for USF, and I did this when I was coaching, when you're at USF, and let's say, for example, you're a player on the East Bay, and it's really, when you're young, it's like, my gosh, that's a long way to go over there and live over there. And recruiting for USF to the East Bay was really the best thing they could ever do. And they had some great players coming out of the East Bay and ended up at USF. And it was a home away from home for the guys that could get home quickly. And I looked at it that way in the city, and I got to bring my laundry home to my mom. I mean, my God, and all the good home cooked meals on the weekends, and brought my teammates over where she cooked some pasta for the guys. And to this day, they've never forgotten the pasta meals. So, they gave them an opportunity to get away from the dorm eating and come on over to a home cooked pasta meal.
So it's your senior year. You just get done playing. What are you thinking about? Do you kind of know what you want to do? The next step for you?
What's funny about that? And I said I was immature going to USF. I never knew what I wanted to do. All I was, for me, growing up in the grammar schools there, I just went in the playgrounds and played basketball all the time. And I can remember when the fog came in, it was damp and wet and drizzly. My basketball would get all wet, but I'd be out there, and I loved it. And that's the only thing I thought about. I was a business administration major at USF, and I went through that until, the senior year. And really, again, by my senior year, what was I going to do? I'm playing basketball. That was it. And but when I got to my senior year, I needed an extra semester, because the units, I took the minimum amount of units and was able to really get through and did pretty well there. And then I needed the extra semester. So Coach Pete Paletta was nice enough to say, look, we want you to graduate. You stay in and get your teaching credential, which I did. And they also made me help out with the freshman basketball team. So that was my first experience coaching. And, it was a huge change because it's not just shooting the ball or playing or having fun. It's losing, learning about game management, game preparation, motivation, communication, all the things that you really need with people. And, that was really a great learning experience for me. So to this day, I was really fortunate and thankful that the coaching staff and Pete Paletta and Ross Judici, respected me enough to say, hey, wanted to have Brovelli there help out the freshman team. And I did. And Phil Vukisevich was the freshman coach at that time and learned a lot from Phil. Phil was a great, technician of the game. And so you learn to, continue to learn what you learn, CYO all the way up to great fundamentals that USF has always taught.
So talk about your first head coaching job. How did that happen?
Well, my first head coaching job, which was funny, I got my teaching credential, and Phil Vikisevich, before he came to USF, was at the Lick Wilmerdine High School. And that happened to open up right at the end of the freshman season when I was helping Phil there. And Phil says, there's a high school job going to be open at Lick Wilmerdine. Well, Lick Wilmerdine's a very small private school right across the street from San Francisco City College. And I said, yeah, geez, what a great opportunity. I'm still very young and still a lot to learn. And so I said, yeah, let's do it. And I was there got the job at Lick Wilmerdine, very fortunate. And it was a lot of different jobs. I was a tennis coach. I didn't know anything about tennis. So I put the best player, of course, you're the captain, and we're on a schedule here. And I was athletic director, and so I hired my old COIO coach as a baseball coach, Darryl Smith, who did a great job on the baseball team. So I ran everything there, so it was a lot to learn, but it was a great learning thing to start on that level. And so I was there for 7 years before the next jump. So, that was, I was very fortunate with Phil Vikisevich to recommend him for that job.
So what was your next job after that?
Well, when I got the high school job, in those years, Bill, if you remember, the system basically throughout the Bay Area, it was reverse action. It was half court. It was Cal played the same way, because Coach Newell, once he left USF, went to Cal and won an NC2A championship in 1959 with Darrell Emhoff. So again, the NC2A championship stayed right around the Bay Area, and most of the teams, we're all copycats as coaches. And where are the successful programs, and what are they running? Well, you had most teams running reverse action, which is a kind of reverse the ball action. You get into the post and work off the post, and then you had some guard plays depending on where you cut. So we stayed with that, but I always wanted to learn. This is what I grew up with. I grew up with everything. They did exactly the same, and I said, now I'm a high school coach. And I know I was in great fear. I'll never forget when I first started coaching, great fear of a team coming in with a full court press and not being able to bring the ball up court. So that was my first, my goodness. If that ever happened, I wouldn't be able to live with it for the kids. So I really prepped on the press offenses and how to break things and then not turn the ball over. But what I did was I made a point to make sure to go to every basketball clinic that I could, not only to meet other coaches, college coaches, but to learn the stuff that and then those were the years it was just kind of beginning those college clinics, and went to a lot. And that gave me an opportunity to meet probably one of the best coaches that I ever around was Jack Avina, who happened to be the junior college coach at San Mateo Junior College. So, I learned and met from him. And when he got the head job at University of Portland from College of Marin, he asked me to come with him as an assistant coach on the 4-year level, Division I. And I was, again, very lucky to be in the right place at the right time and learn from those clinics more basketball, and really Jack turned into my personal mentor, even though I had really great coaching at USF. He was a great communicator, and he was great with people. And I learned a lot that basketball is a heck of a lot more than just getting some X and O's on the floor and telling them what to do. If you don't connect with people, and you don't connect with the people you're going to coach, and they don't believe in you as a person, it just makes the job a lot tougher. So Jack was just one of those guys that just connected with people, and he had a great career at the University of Portland.
Can you talk about your first college job and what were you thinking when you started? Were you ready for it?
My first head coaching job?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I was prepared for what Jack did when I was at the University of Portland. Again, those were the years with freshman teams. He gave me the freshman team to coach. So I was also basically I was actually more of a recruiter, but he gave me the freshman team. And we had a pretty good freshman team with some guys that came in that year. And so when I helped him out on the varsity on the floor, obviously carried over a lot of the things that Jack taught all the way through. So I learned a lot from Jack. So was I prepared for my first head coaching job at the University of San Diego, which happened to be a Division II program when I got the job? I would say X and O wise, yes and no. Yes, I knew the game, but at the same time, the game was changing. It was getting a little more up tempo. Guards were more in play. So the game was just kind of, just changing a little bit. So you had to adjust with it, with the players that were coming into your program. So, but it was exciting because it made you, and I remember, I think it was Johnny Wooden at the time. Once you think you know everything about the game, you've lost. You're not a coach anymore. You learn something every day, every year about this game of basketball. And I was fortunate, Bill, with, again, going back to Coach Pete Newell. Pete Newell Jr. was on the RSI championship team as a freshman and sophomore. So I spent a lot of time over Coach's house, and we talked basketball. So I was able to learn a lot there, and listen. Just to we'd go in there, listen, and talk basketball. But I think that was the key, is just the learning and growing as the game grew, and not only as the game grew, but as players grew. I'll never forget the first player that came in with a tattoo. I said, "What are you doing? You can't take those things off." So, but I always pretty straight up with the guys, and had fun with it, and it was fun. I enjoyed it. And if your job is fun, you got the best thing in the world.
Talk about just two of your best recruits when you were in San Diego, and talk about two of your best teams when you were in San Diego.
Yeah, San Diego. Again, as I said, we started off the Division II, and I had a mix of high school kids, basically local out of San Diego, and a couple from the Bay Area, because that's where I really knew the area, and high school coaches. And then I had some the JC kids, and I got a kid from Harlem out of JC, and the coach phoned me up and he says, "Hey, I got a guy here that's pretty darn good." And I said, "Okay." His name was Eddie Sundance Davis, and I'll tell you one thing, he was as good a guard, from handling the ball to scoring to being unselfish, that I've ever coached. And so he came right in and fit right in with the group. Here's a guy from Harlem going to University of San Diego, a pretty rich school, and made the adjustment. But he grew and ended up, he's one of the top guys, I think, at Rucker Park now. And he always used to phone when I was with the Washington Wizards and say, "How you doing? How you doing?" And so we kept in contact for quite a while there. But Eddie was quite a player. And I can remember one play he made against San Diego State. That's when I was trying to build the program from Division II to Division I. So I upgraded the schedule a little bit. So we got San Diego State on the schedule and hopefully become a rivalry locally there. He made one play on the breakaway where this is when the game is starting to open up a little bit when you get better players. But he made a play that came down on the right side. He's a left-hander. He went between the back, between the legs, all in the air at the same time, and then kicked it to the left for easy layup for the streaking wing guy, the left wing guy. and it brought the house down. And basketball, all of a sudden, everybody started loving it because we were an exciting team, and ended up going to the Final Four for Division II. So, but step by step, it took a while to convince the administration to say, look, I grew up with the West Coast Conference. I know the West Coast Conference. All the schools on the West Coast are basically Catholic basketball schools, with the exception of Pepperdine or Pacific. But the rest are, pretty much Catholic basketball schools. And in San Diego's probably the only one in the West that's not in it. And I think would really help enrollment. It would help create interest. It would just really bring the student body together, which all happened, by the way. So I was very, very happy. One thing they had to do and make a commitment, though, was to bring every other sport with it when you went to Division I. So that was a huge commitment by the way, an administration that was probably the best administration I've ever worked for. I mean, the president was as good a guy as you'd ever want to meet, and the vice president came from Creighton. And so he had a taste of another Catholic Jesuit basketball school, and so he had a taste of that, and he saw what he could do. And USD in that time period was so small and still growing that it was kind of like a very sleepy school, and all of a sudden you had some excitement there. So it changed. It gave us an opportunity to really change the thing when we made the jump to Division I.
So now you're in your final year at San Diego, and you're going to make a transition. So what are you thinking? Do you have a sense of what your next job's going to be?
You know what? I never searched for jobs, Bill, to be very honest with you. I was always one that, like the San Diego job, came along, and the contacts were Phil Wolpert happened to be the athletic director, not at that time period, but a little bit earlier when he retired USF and became the athletic director at San Diego. Well, he brought with him a player by the name of John Cunningham, excuse me, who was quite a player at USF and made all the regional teams when he was after the Bill Russell years. So he was there. So, I knew people there. And when that job opened up, I applied for it and was very fortunate to get it. But I never really searched for things that way. And I remember when we went to Division I, I told the guys, I said, it's not going to be easy here. This conference is a pretty darn good conference. And it's going to take some time to really develop this thing. So I put a little 5-year thing on it. Said, it's going to take us 5 years. Well, fortunately, in the 5th year, we won the championship. So it just happened to work out.
So you take in 84, you take the USF job, and USF had some issues, and it was under restriction. So why did you do that?
It's probably that's a great question, and it's a question that I still answer today, because I remember phoning one of my good friends. I said, and I told him about the opportunity of USF, and he goes, "Are you happy at USD?" And I said, "Yeah. I mean, you can't find a better school or a better administration." Or he said, "Why are you leaving?" I said, "Well, that's a good question too." And there are a lot of I grew up in the city. My mother was still living up there by herself. So I had relatives up there, and they're starting a program that I grew up with, and I knew that USF needed basketball, and so it was the toughest decision I ever made by far, and to this day it still is. And I love USD. It was a great experience for me with the people more than anything, and in the ability to develop something from nothing, from Division II to Division I, and win a championship, and go to the NC2A with their first NC2A team. And then I said, why do I want to start again? I had a young team, that came back. I met a big 7-footer there from Sacramento, Scott Thompson, who was pretty darn good, and a few others, and Mike Whitmarsh, who was on the team when we won it, he got a silver medal in the Olympics for beach volleyball. So I had a couple of real good athletes on that USD team, and it was a tough call. But anyway, I ended up taking the USF job and starting from scratch again. And it was the toughest job I ever had, to tell you the truth. Not only because, I mean, I did the USD job starting from almost nothing, and this was just kind of tougher because of the situation, and you had to try and mold one group against another group that would agreed with a decision and not a decision for the program. So that took time. But I knew the alums, and I grew up with some of them. So, but we brought it back to a competitive level. We won 16 games our second year, and brought in guys like Rodney Tension and a few others, and Anthony Mann, and a few other guys that could play right away. A couple again mixing with junior college and high school kids. We got Mark McCaffrey, who was a high school All-American out of Bishop O'Dowd High School, who was highly recruited by Iowa and Stanford, and he remembered. Because I used to go in there and say, hey, remember the Bill Cartwrights and the Bill Russells and the tradition that this program has. This is what we're going to try and do here to bring this thing back. And so Mark came over, graduated in 4 years, tremendous player for us, all league 4 years, all the way through, and made Hall of Fame. And then we were able to get a couple other Hall of Fame later on with Orlando Smart and Joe Walker. So we had a good mix of players. It took time, but and it made the program competitive again. So it was a tough job, though, Bill. I got to tell you.
Talk about your best game. Now, of course, there's rumors that it was the Notre Dame game, of course, that that got a lot of press. But what was your best game? Was that it?
Well, I'll tell you what. It's probably one of them. And I'll tell you how that started. When I got the job, I wanted to reestablish some of the rivalries that USF had in the past to create interest, because people want to see the best basketball they can. So you wanted to play some they were Pac-10 in those years, not Pac-12. You wanted to play Pac-10 Cal. You wanted to make sure you got that rivalry back. Lou Campanelli was just hired the same time I was, and I knew Lou at Cal. So we kept a home and home every year. And that was tremendous. So in the meantime, I phoned up to Digger and I said, we played Notre Dame home and home every year. We'd like to, add you on and go the home and home route. Well, through a lot of negotiation in terms of, where are we going to play and, who's going to officiate and all the things you got to go through to get those games in those years. We agreed to a home and home series. Which was really good for the program, and so was the Cal series. And Stanford played us for a while, also home and home, when Coach Davis was there. And then when they changed coaches, they didn't play anymore for whatever reason. But I wanted to keep the local rivalries there also to bring it back. The Notre Dame game, they were quite a team. They nationally ranked and came in. And we kind of snuck up on them against I had a good group of guys, though. I'll tell you, we had a together group that, were really competitive and didn't lay down for anything. And they fought and they ended up winning a big game there. So, those are the things that kind of bring back. And that was the first standing room only game we had when we brought the program back. And it was quite exciting. And you remember the Notre Dame games, I'm sure.
I do.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. In fact, the one back there at Notre Dame, the fire alarm going off. But it was fun, and those were the first steps really of getting some top competition.
So you ended up at USF for a pretty good while. After that, you ended up going to, I think, Denver. How did that happen?
Well, what's interesting, again, you're not looking, but when I went to USD, Bernie Bickerstaff was the head coach. So I took Bernie's job at USD. Bernie went with Casey Jones to the Washington Bullets at that time. They were called the Bullets. And so I knew Bernie, and I knew John Cunningham. And John says, well, you know, Bernie's leaving and you'd be interested. And I talked to Bernie, and Bernie is quite a great guy, and he really helped me along the way. And still to this day, we're good friends, and he's just he did a great job there in the NBA. But he was with the Denver Nuggets, and at that time he talked about being a player personnel and development coach, and coming in starting that way, and then moving up as an assistant coach from there. And I did. So I went to the Denver Nuggets, and Mutombo was there, and a pretty good group of guys that was there when I went in there. And then, as you know, in the NBA, changes are made, and Bernie went to Washington at that time Bullets, and asked me to go along with him, which I did. And that was the same year that we had the city vote to change the Bullets, and the city voted to make it the Wizards, and they've been the Wizards ever since. So, but I went with Bernie to the Wizards, and had great experiences. You know, the NBA is such a different game than college. It took me a while really to learn the real subtleties about the NBA, and then the shot clock and how it's utilized better. And you know, it was quite an adjustment. But and I had Dick Motta. Bernie at Denver was the general manager at the time, and Dick Motta was the head coach at Denver. So Dick, I was able to learn from Dick Motta, who was quite a coach in those years.
Wow. So from there, am I reading this right? Sioux Falls? Sioux Falls?
Sioux Falls. Yeah, Sioux Falls came.
How does that happen?
Well, you look for a job. What's available? You know, between Denver and the Wizards, it was a void. So I had coached Eric Musselman, who at USD in our championship team, and I knew Bill, his dad, very well. And but Eric was a coach in the CBA at the time, right up from Sioux Falls. And he said, you know, hey, Sioux Falls is open, coach. You want to, you know, we'll try and help you get the Sioux Falls job. And I got it. And we were able to get to the playoffs, and didn't win the thing. But that's quite a league, because you're dealing with players. There's another very great experience that I had to learn. You got players coming in and out and having to adjust on the fly with a coach, you know, with players coming in, and then, boy, if they're any good, they're taken right away to the NBA. So now you got to restart again and reload. So that was quite an experience, but a good experience. I think the CBA was, and it was the people in Sioux Falls they were the best. Great people, and they sold out every game.
So after your time at Sioux Falls, you ended up in Charlotte?
Charlotte as a scout for Bernie. Bernie ended up after the Wizards, ended up over there at Charlotte, and I helped Bernie scout at Charlotte for a while. Yes.
And after that, and I really saw this well. Did you coach for the Japanese national team?
The Japanese national team, and Coach Pete Newell, who had great connections to Japanese coaches, because he used to go over there every year, and he asked if I would be interested in going over there and to coach the Japanese national team. And I said, gee, yeah, I would sure would. A guy by the name of Dave Yanai, who used to coach at Dominguez Hills College, was the coach there. And so I went down to meet Dave, and he says, yeah, and he gave me a lot of pointers on, you know, what to do in Japan. And so I went over there, and I had an interpreter when we went over there, and we trained. We flew into Tokyo, and we trained up at Matsumoto City, which is up in the mountains. You take a bullet train up the mountains, and we had a big 7'4" guy by the name of Chibi, who played for Jacobina at the University of Portland. And he then left the University of Portland, came back to Japan to coach on to play on the Japanese national team. So I was getting them prepared. I stayed there about 10 days to prepare them for the Asian Games, and they were going to play China. So I brought in kind of a little screwy little matchup zone where we put Chibi 7'4" in the middle, and kind of well, it didn't take me long to figure that one out because he couldn't move very well, but he was big, and so we played a little matchup zone and had some fun with it. But boy, I'll tell you, great drill work with the Japanese team. They love practice and drills, and really good at it. And they were team guys and played hard. Another great learning experience for me. I was very fortunate there.
Yeah, I had an opportunity myself to coach over Japan when I was in Osaka. So,
okay,
yeah, playing with the Japanese teams, we did have 4 Americans. But it was great. I'd get to practice early. There was an 11 o'clock practice. I get there 8:15, 8:30. They were already there shooting.
Exactly.
So it was, wow, these guys are amazing.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, it was fantastic. Yeah.
So after that, you go to Minnesota. Minnesota, is that right?
Yeah, Minnesota with Bill Musselman was the head coach at Minnesota at the time. He just got the job, and I worked with him for the summer camps, and when he got the guys in the draft and everything in the summer leagues, so he brought me in there, and so we worked together a little bit there for Minnesota. And one of my former players, Mike Whitmarsh, who was the guy I said that was a silver medalist in beach volleyball. He was the last guy cut. I was hoping he would make it. He's about a 6'6" guy, that one of those guys that were unassuming as a player, but when you look at the end of the game, he was always the guy who made the winning play, whether it be a rebound, a pass, a block shot, just one of those great players. So he was the last guy cut there in Minnesota, but I was only there with Bill for that summer.
Talk a little bit about what you're doing now.
Yeah, now, my whole life has been around basketball.
Yes, it has.
And I love basketball. And I go back to the years of playing in that foggy, drizzled playground, and I used to go down by myself, and I had to be home by 6. I better be home by 6 o'clock. My mother would kill me if I went home by 6 o'clock. No cell phones, man. I just better be there. So, went down there and played in the playgrounds and everything. And I just love basketball. And I love the people that I met in basketball, whether it be in coaching or players or teammates. And I played in the summer league with Freddie LaCour and then Thomas Sherry. What more you want for there? They were older than me. Yet played in the Booker T. Washington summer league. So with those guys. So when it came at the end, sooner or later, it's time to go as a coach. So the broadcasting thing came in. Pat Olson was my play-by-play when we brought the program back at USF. We first had Ron Barr, who has a very successful sports byline program in Sirius Radio now.
Yeah.
But Pat Olson took over for Ron Barr as a play-by-play. So Pat and I go way, way back, 30 years of being together with USF basketball. And so when I finished coaching and everything, he said, "Hey, we could be a natural. Why don't we just, we know each other. It's an easy hookup." And I said, "Great." But I said, "If I ever get in your way, you let me know, because this is new to me. I don't want to interrupt and all that kind of thing." So we got along. We've been doing it for 20 years now, so we have a lot of fun with it.
Have you had any advice for Coach Chris, who's taken a huge responsibility for the USF coaching job? What would your advice be for him?
I would say have an open mind and listen. And the open mind would be, he may have been around a certain system or a certain style um, he may have to adjust. And I remember going back to Coach Newell saying, you've got to be resilient. If you're a coach, you've got to be resilient. Things change on the run. So I would say have an open mind. I'm sure he has certain thoughts about what he wants to do. He's got a pretty big team. I understand. I haven't seen the roster, but you got 2 7-footers there. So they're going to be sound, and they got good guards coming in. It's going to be a very good team. But how do you get the most and best out of your guys, not only as players but individuals? And that goes to the listening part. And I didn't do this when I just came out of college. I didn't listen that much because I figured, hey man, I know the game. I used to play and all that stuff. But the more you listen, the more you pick up and the better you get, I believe. And those 2 things to me are very, very important.
Jim, talk about your family, wife, kids.
Well, my wife, I met when she was 12 years old. When you grow up in the city, and we talked about the fog, you got to get out of the fog during the summer. So my dad had a little trailer up a place called the Russian River, where he brought his family, my sister and me, and some friends. We used to go up there and camp up the Russian River area. So we went up there every summer. And so now what we do is we kind of continued on the tradition. When I came back from San Diego and then Washington, D.C. and everything, and we're here. And I said, well, now we got our young kids and nothing better to grow up with. It's kind of like a throwback, Back to the Future area up there. And it's fun. The kids, they love to fish, and they love to swim, and they love growing up together with other kids from the city that you meet that you didn't know before. So we have a little place up the river up there now that we go every summer. In fact, we're going to be there in a couple of weeks. So we go up there, as much as we can. So I have a son and a daughter. My son's with the Marin County Sheriff's Department, a sergeant in the Marin County Sheriff's Department. Been there probably 30 years now. And, he played for me at USF. In fact, one of those guys like me, when I was he made all Marin County here, and he's coming to USF. He's thinking he's a great player. And I'm saying, wait a second here. He played Marin County. You're going to come here and play USF. And but I'll tell you what, he was a very, very solid player. He was fortunate. We had a really good guards with Gerald Walker and Orlando Smart in those years, and he would come off the bench and really fill his role to what it should be. So he played for me. And Michelle, she is now the athletic director at Novato High School. She used to be the head basketball coach at Dominican women's basketball program when they first started. She won the league, when she was coaching there. So she's now the athletic director at Dominican and has 2 sons. And my son has 2 boys and a girl. And they all play sports. And right now, my wife and I, we spend time just going to games and watching them play. So it's a lot of fun. A couple play lacrosse, volleyball, and the guys play football and basketball and baseball. So, we're having fun going to see those young kids grow and develop.
Jim, thank you so much for being on.
Hey.
I've always really admired you, how you handled yourself. Just really appreciative to have our conversations. But thank you so much.
Hey, I'm really thankful for you, Bill, having me on. And this was fun. And it's always fun to sit down with guys that love the game and just talk, and not about themselves, but about the game itself and the people they know. It's the best. So I'm happy you had me on. I really appreciate it. And I'll see you down the road soon.